What's up, everybody, and welcome once again to the Links and Locks Best Bet Podcast. I'm Jason Sobel from the Action Network. He is Ben Everill from the PGA Tour, and we are here to break down our favorite 18 bets playing 18 holes for this week's CJ Cup. And as a reminder, the Links and Locks Podcast proudly presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. Sign up with promo code ACTION to get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in New Jersey and Colorado. Bet $1 on any game, get $200 for free. Benny, what's going on? How are you this week?
Hey, Jace, I'm doing great, mate. Looking forward to another big event, as you said, CJ Cup there at Congaree. We did okay out of Japan, didn't we? I mean, we didn't hit the big winner there. I think you might have mentioned Keegan at some point. Not for me, but a couple of guys that performed pretty well, and let's see if we can't win some more money for the punters this week, eh?
Yeah, I mentioned Keegan Bradley as a first-round leader last week. My guy stole the first-round lead from his buddy Keegan, and then Keegan goes on to win the tournament, so that's okay. So spoke a little bit with Keegan this morning, and to say he is in good spirits right now is putting it mildly. He is extremely pleased with how it turned out. You saw he was overcome with emotion afterwards, and so really happy for Keegan, who I don't know if people realize this because he's not as personable probably as a guy to the outside world as some other guys. He's not a Max Homa type. He's not this big personality, but for those who know Keegan well, he is as genuine as they come on the PGA Tour. So very happy for Keegan. And we move on to the CJ Cup, where Keegan is playing this week as well. They're at Congaree Golf Club in South Carolina this week. We've seen it one other time, hosted the one-off Palmetto Championship on the PGA Tour last year. But Benny, you and I were talking very briefly before we hit record on the pod, and this one should play a little bit differently than it did last year, correct?
Yeah, look, it was played in June of 21, the Palmetto Championship at Congaree there. Now, basically at that time of year, that course is usually closed. They're not a summer course because of the humidity and the wet they can get and whatnot. It's a winter course, and it's meant to play hard and fast. And that's, by all reports, what it's expected to play this week, as opposed to being a little bit softer and spongy back then in June. So with that in mind, yes, I think we can take some stuff from the edition before. It was 11 under, I think Garrett Higo won it. I think it'll still be similar, just a different way about getting there, if you will. You're going to need to plot your way around like a sandbelt course in Australia. The ball will roll out and into sandy waste areas and bunkers and whatnot if you're not careful. So you do need your accuracy, and you need to account for that roll. When you're coming into greens as well, you might be hitting the front of greens rather than going at those pins to get close. It's going to take a little bit of thinking around this place. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I am too, and I'm excited to have some of my picks, which I think correlate to a thinking man's kind of golf course. So let's go play 18 holes, making 18 bets. Benny, as always, you're on the tee. Please swing away.
My first outright play that I'm going to throw up there this week is a guy that's not from Australia and did play quite decent there at the last time as well. One of the many runner-ups there, but I'm going to throw Tyrrell Hatton at you at plus 3,500. Tyrrell knows how to play these style of courses. Obviously, it's not links per se, but it has that feel, that look. And again, you have to plot your way around. Tyrrell Hatton is smart enough. He's just got to be whether or not he can keep his head on. When he gets a bad break here or there, or a roll to the left or a roll to the right that he doesn't quite like, he keeps his head in the game. I like Tyrrell Hatton just because, more than anything, that value. We have a big field this week, great names. But 3,500 for Tyrrell Hatton, who's shown flashes of form of late, is good for me.
Yeah, I always bet on Tyrrell Hatton keeping his wits about him on a difficult golf course. I'm sure he will be just pleased the entire time, just having a great time. So, no, I do like that play. I'm going for the second hole with my long shot play, which is got a big number, but I think there's a lot of value here, a much bigger number than Hatton, but obviously a bigger long shot. Kevin Kisner, coming off the President's Cup just a few weeks ago, he's listed at 150 to 1. Boy, that's a massive number on Kis this week. I really like that. We've seen, first of all, a Southeast golf course where you've got to use the ground, you've got to be creative. That's a Kevin Kisner type of golf course. Secondly, we know that he's not afraid to go out there and beat a big field with lots of big names in it. He is not intimidated by anybody. So put those two things together, and I think Kisner is a really, really nice play at 150 to 1. I will sprinkle some on that number.
Well, mate, I'm going to come forward then, I guess, because I had this in a later slot. But you've gone long shot, so I'll show you my long shot. I had Kevin Kisner as one of those options.
All right.
And so we'll go with Kevin Kisner as one, but I'm going to throw in a second one now because of that. And I'm going to go with my first Australian of the week. And I'm going to tell you that Jason Day at 80 to 1 is somebody to look at in the long shot scenario, right? So you might want to sprinkle across the board. But look, Jason at Vegas was starting to hit his straps. He had a couple of low rounds there. He did so with the tribe of youngsters nipping at his heels all week. And by that, I mean his 4 kids going mental and crazy and carrying on like the cool kids they are. Look, Jason, I know I'm gung-ho on him. I've been talking about it, but there's going to be a time he wins again. You're not going to see these numbers again. It's a smaller field. He's played in Australia growing up a lot. He is a high ball flight. We know that, but he also knows how to play these style of courses. If he can keep it accurate enough, Jason Day is very good value at 8,000.
For the sake of continuality, is that a word, Benny?
Continuity, maybe.
Thank you. That's what I meant. We're going to skip over my top 5s for now and get right to my top 10 play, which is Jason Day. As I wrote in my column, Benny, I'm not sure that I have mentioned Jason Day's name in a piece of preview content since maybe the West Coast swing last year, 2021. It's been a long time since I've been on Jason Day, former world number 1, now 143rd in the world. But like you said, if there's ever going to be a course and a format, no cut, a bunch of big names, but a smaller field, this feels like the place. He was 8th place in Vegas just a couple weeks ago. Look, if Ricky Fowler can contend for a title, I think Jason Day can too. You got to kind of clench your teeth, grit him a little bit this week if you're going after Jason Day, but I think it could be a nice play with some good value. I will take him for a top 10, and I might sprinkle a little on an outright for J Day too as well.
All right, well, just because you mentioned a name there, I'm going to use that segue and I'm going to go to my top 20 play. Again, I'm looking for, in my top 20s and top 40s, as you know, I generally try to get to the plus numbers. We can take an easy out and we can go the minus numbers if we want. So don't sit there and think that I think this is the absolute best and most likely top 20. I just think this is the value top 20. And I'm going to run with that hot hand of Ricky Fowler plus 200 for a top 20. And I'm going to say it because of this. I really am a believer that the time with Butch he spent, he missed the cut in Vegas, but it actually worked out for him. He got more time with Butch. They started honing in on the return to what they're looking for out of Ricky. He's feeling good mentally. He went so close there in Japan. No cut, etc. So I feel like he doesn't need to fly out of the blocks, if you will, on Thursday. He just needs to play half decent. I think Fowler will continue some form for the plus 200 at top 20 in a small field. I think he can make that happen.
I like that pick, Benny, and I will steal your entire intro to that play because, like you said, for the most part, I'm not playing top 20s on Rory McIlroy, on John Rahm, on Scotty Scheffler. You're looking for plus money numbers on these. And so especially in a 78-man field, you can find some good value. I'm going to go with a guy at plus 230 for a top 10. Taylor Moore is playing some really nice golf, 12th place in his last finish. You look at what he's done at Southeast golf courses, and something about the Bermuda tends to really pique Moore's interest the most. And so looking at him as a top 20, he's been either inside or right outside the top 20 in his last 4 starts in the Southeast region of the country. With a smaller field this week, I think you kind of look at him based on the numbers, and he should be inside that top 25% of the field this week. So I think that is a nice play. All right, we get to the 7th hole then.
7th hole, I'm looking at a couple of 3-ball options that DraftKings threw out early in the week, to be honest. And I know you can get it across at different books as well. But they've grouped together these. I'm going to give you 3 of them and where I think there's some value in them. They've got Shane Lowry, Jordan Spieth, and Max Homa, with Homa the favourite there. Spieth at 170, I like, potentially, thinking man's course. And Lowry's at plus 200 in that 3-ball. So rather than, look, Max is awesome. He's in great form. but I don't know if he's going to necessarily hold off those other two guys this week. And full disclosure, too, I was at the Rams game here in LA yesterday, and so was Max Homer, and he was really enjoying himself. Let's just say he's having a great time in LA. He was hoping, obviously, he'd be watching the Dodgers in a fifth game. I think that didn't happen for him, bit of disappointment for Max. But look, I just think that again, Spieth's had some success in Australia, 2 times Australian Open champion. Plus 170 just to beat 2 guys. I like that. Same thought here with Cameron Young, an outsider against Hovland and Tom Kim, plus 185. Big hitter, but a straight hitter. If he can keep it on the map, he's a chance to upset those other 2 guys. And look, Rory and Rahm are the hot favourites. But when are you going to see Scheffler plus 220 to beat just 2 guys?
Yeah.
Value. I'm not saying, look, Rory should have a good week. Rahm should have a good week. But Scheffler 220 just to beat 2 guys. Value's there.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I will be mentioning Jordan Spieth later on in the
yes,
podcast.
There you go.
Tease. All right, we get to the 8th hole, and I'm going to go with the top 40 here, and I get it. Look, you're not going to make a whole lot of money betting top 40s in a 78-man field. That's why we got to dig deep. We got to find some guys. You're really barely going to find any guys even at plus money. But I found Lee Hodges in his second season on the PGA Tour, playing some nice golf. I mean, look, it is nothing overly exciting. It is not, hey, I think he's going to win this week, but just finish in the top half of the field at minus 125. Again, this is not an all-in kind of play. This is not a put the mortgage on it kind of play, but it's just Lee Hodges is a pretty nice player. I think he's playing pretty nicely right now. I think that's a decent play. If you like to make some conservative bets and you're not going to go, okay, or maybe you want to offset some long shot outright plays, you just want to bankroll something, I think Lee Hodges for a top 40 could work out.
Man, I got the exact same thoughts in the top 40 market. I've picked 2 guys at plus money here. Very few are there in the market at plus money. And I'm thinking not a lot. Like, I'm talking throw $10 on each of these guys to try to get some of your money back for your bigger plays. The 2 guys that I liked, first one is sort of on reputation alone because he hasn't necessarily set the world on fire yet, but Justin Suh, plus 100 for a top 40. And last week, there was a guy on 59 watch out there in Japan, John Ha, plus 140 for the top 40 this week. So, look, sprinkle there for me, more than anything, trying to just cover some money from other bets.
Suh and Ha. I like that. All right. As we make the turn here on the Links and Locks podcast, just a reminder that this podcast is proudly presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. Sign up with promo code ACTION to get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in New Jersey and Colorado. $1 on any game, you get $200 for free. It's just that easy. All right. We get to the 10th hole. It is my tee here on the 10th, and usually on the 10th, I like going with my first-round leader play, and I'll do that as well right now. A guy that I always like, Benny. I can't tell you if I haven't mentioned Jason Day on the podcast in a year and a half, then I haven't mentioned Keith Mitchell on the podcast in a day and a half because I talk about him all the time. His first round scoring average over his last 8 starts is 69.63. That includes 5 scores of 68 or better. His last one in Vegas a couple of weeks ago was a 65 on Thursday. I'm still bullish on him long term. I think he can win more than once on the PGA Tour over the next 10 months. But until he starts stepping on the gas pedal, because he's been outside the top 30 in his last 6 starts, I'll stay a little conservative. I won't go too aggressive on my Keith Mitchell plays, but I think he can put one good round together as he's been doing lately. I'll take him for first round leader.
Yeah, mate, I like that. As you know, I'm a fan of Keith when he gets in the mix. And it was a year ago at this event when it was in Vegas that Rory McIlroy singled him out as a guy that showed the depth of tour, and that, when he's in the mix, Rory originally was thinking, oh, I've got this guy covered, only to be sort of shocked into coherence to be like, no, this guy isn't afraid of me. So I like Keith. But I'm going to go for my first round leader scenario. I'm going to go back to the advice I tried last week that didn't necessarily work, but I'm still sticking by it for these type of events, especially. I'm going to go here with the favorites because I don't want to bet them at their numbers to win the tournament.
Okay.
So the guys I'm looking at here are Rory, Rahm, and actually Spieth. Again, I feel like I want to get on them. Don't want to get on them at their outright number just yet. It's too short, especially Rory. It was around like 650 in some spots, or 850. I want to see that first round and then maybe jump on those guys as they blow out a little bit for the outright from there. This also gives me a little cover for that. So if I hit a little bit, put a little bit on the outright first round lead, I haven't put them in the outright market yet. But let's say Rory goes out and starts super hot. Well, bugger it, I've missed him at the 650 and now he's 400, but I collected on that first round lead at 14, 15, 1600. It's sort of like a cover bet in these short ones where it is possible that a guy at the top of the leaderboard can go out fast. So that's the tactic I'm going to use. Not big cash, just a little bit there to cover me before I go in on those guys in the outright. That's what I'd be doing.
Yeah, I like that play. That's very smart. Okay. Get to the 12th hole. In my preview this week, I targeted Christian Bezuidenhout. We don't even have to edit that. It's hard to say. Christian Bezuidenhout. Thank you. Jeez, I practiced that for like 2 years and I still
just call him Seabez. We call him Seabez in the international term.
Way better. Seabez. I targeted him, Benny, as a guy that I'm not yet going after for outright market bets, but I do like for head-to-head matchups. And the reason for that is because he's just playing good, solid golf. Last 4 results, tied for 29th, tied for 20th, tied for 39th, tied for 12th. What does that tell us? Well, he's not making a ton of money, but he's just a solid, consistent performer. So I'm looking at him for head-to-head matchups. And wouldn't you know it, the first one I found plus money, in fact, plus 105 against last week's champion, who you know is going to be wiped out after that. In fact, I spoke with Keegan Bradley. We may know this by the time they tee off on Thursday because he's going to be meeting with the media. But Keegan told me flying home from Japan, staying at home for a day or two, then flying to Congaree. That's a lot of travel after a big week for him. Getting Seabez at plus money in that matchup is pretty good. And I like him in some other matchups, like I said. Just a good, solid performer. I would expect something right around the top 20, maybe better. So this is a place where if you're looking to fade some players who are around the same number as Bezuidenhout, I would take him there.
I like it, mate. Yeah. It is hard for guys to back up. You saw last week, people were a bit shocked when I said we should fade Tom Kim. And look, he just wasn't able to keep the foot on the gas. You know, it was a long lot of travel. He's also was thinking ahead to this week. And now, look, I've left him out of my lineups here this week, Tom, but maybe he will reinvigorate himself this week because of that. We'll see. But that first start up, especially with long travel, is always hard. So, yeah, Keegan, it'll be hard for him to keep the roll going. So definitely a nice play at plus money that you're talking about there. All right, I'm going to go to top 5. Now, this guy, I was, he basically would probably have made my top 2 outrights had Hatton's number not been so high. It's a pretty obvious play, to be honest, for a top 5, but I like Matt Fitzpatrick here this week, plus 350. I think you can look at him in the 10 outright, as I said, across the board if you want. Again, look, he was in the top 10 last time it was there. Not really comparable, yes, comparable, but in terms of a guy who's smart and can plot it around and keep things on the map, Fitz is a pretty decent effort at that. Look, he won the US Open, as we know, getting it around. I feel like he'll come in with some pretty good confidence and maybe even under the radar just a little bit because of the big names that are all in the field. Fitz, the little guy, sometimes gets forgotten about. But I see that as plus 350, not bad. And again, this is another possible person who you can wait on that first round if you want, because you'll see that movement, especially if a bigger name leads, but he's in a few shots back. You might get great value on Matt Fitzpatrick in the later rounds.
I think that's a smart play, Benny, and a smart way to play it. I mentioned Fitzpatrick in my column as well. So I think that's a nice one. I'll get back to my top 5s, which I skipped over earlier. And I don't necessarily love anyone at the top of the board so much that I'll go, oh, you've got to take Rory. You've got to take Jon Rahm for a top 5 lock of the week. I don't feel that way. But I don't feel great about any of the guys further down the board where I go, oh, this guy will definitely play well. So my advice is to take a couple of guys, and if one of them pays off, you're going to be up, at least in this category. And the two guys I'm looking at for top fives this week are guys who have played well on fast, firm golf courses in the past, like this one, Congaree should be. The first, Aaron Wise, who's 45-1 outright, but plus 750 for a top five. The second one is a guy that I've been waiting for an end of year surge, and I'm still waiting for it. Tommy Fleetwood, 80-1 outright this week. I'll sprinkle a little of that number, but plus 1,200 for a top five this week for Tommy Fleetwood, I think is a great number. I will play each of those guys. Think about it this way. If just one of them hits at those numbers, you're doing pretty well. So it's a little bit of a hedge.
Like it. All right. I'm going to the well here. The bookies have jumped off him. You and I have been gung-ho about this guy. It's a top 10 play on my card here, but I also like the long shot at 70-1 for outright for a sprinkle. Cameron Davis, plus 450, top 10. I'm going back to him. I thought he was going to win 2 weeks ago. I stayed with him to hang thereabout in top 10, I think, last week. He sort of, he was okay over there in Japan. But, again, former Australian Open winner. Knows how to play Australian-style courses. Can hit the ball out there. I just don't want to jump off just yet while even though the bookies have. And that's where I think that I might jump some value there. So Cam Davis 70-1 to outright, but 450 for a top 10 Australian style course, Australian player in somewhat of form, confidence rising. I see it as a good chance to get him before that number comes back in.
It makes a lot of sense, Benny. It makes even more sense if I tell you that after the last 2 weeks of being on Cam Davis, I have jumped off. So
there
that should essentially guarantee him the victory this week. All right. 16th hole, I got a couple more long shots for you. Again, these are guys that I'm just kind of sprinkling all over the board. One of them I really like for this golf course. You look at what JT Poston has done lately since his victory at the John Deere Classic. Man, JT is playing some really solid golf. Top 35 in 6 of his last 7 starts. The only one he wasn't was Vegas, where he went to Vegas fresh off a bachelor party, I believe. That's never going to be a secret to success. So other than that, JT Poston playing some really nice golf. He plays his best golf in the Southeast, specifically in the Carolinas. So there's reason to like him this week. And then the other guy who's not playing great golf right now, but if I told you 2, 3, 4 months ago that you get Davis Riley in a limited field at 100-1, you would have jumped at it. So I get it. He's not quite on his game right now, but I can't avoid that big number on Riley.
All right. Yeah, I can see that. As I said, there's definitely a week that you can look for some value. And so that the advice I'll tell people as well is, well, look, we could have a big name, and likely a big name at the top might come through in the end. But there's definitely value across the board because of that, because of the depth at the top of the field. All right, my number one play, 17th hole, number one outright. Again, I've mentioned the bigger names who I think you do need to keep an eye on after that first round. But if you need to go in on someone straight up from the start, I'm going with Sungjae Im, your man that you were talking about last week.
Yep.
Everyone's like, oh, hang on a minute. What about he hasn't had much, Australian sandbelts form, etc. Well, he did play there in the President's Cup in 2019 at Royal Melbourne, and he did go 3-1-1 at that to lead the international team there. He is as accurate as they come off the tee, generally speaking, ball striking machine. He only needs a few of the putts to drop, and he's going to be up there. Again, we talked about what he's after, like with Tom Kim winning a week and a bit ago. There's that form on the board. So I think that, Sungjae Im is a great play, plus 1,800 if you have to get in early.
All right, I like that a lot. I'm still on Sungjae a little bit this week, even though he burned me last week. For my favorite outright, 18th hole, I'm going with the guy who's one of my favorite plays because he's both a narrative play and a technical play. What I mean by that, for the narrative play, is that just a few weeks ago, Benny, right after the President's Cup, we saw Tom Kim be able to parlay that momentum into a victory in Las Vegas. Well, he wasn't the winningest player during the President's Cup that week. Jordan Spieth, maybe not the best player for the U.S. that week, but look, the record proves that he was certainly playing good golf. He was 5-0-0, just the 6th player ever at the President's Cup to hit that mark. He hasn't played in a month, but I still think some of that momentum could be happening for Jordan Spieth. Secondly, the technical play. Look, we mentioned it earlier. This is a thinking man's golf course. You have to be creative on this course. Play it in the air. Use the ground. Figure out how to get your wedge shots to stop close to the hole. That is Jordan Spieth in a nutshell. I love everything about this, the correlation that it should have on his game. And if you think, well, he's not a guy that plays his best golf in the Southeast normally. Well, hey, Quail Hollow, he just went 5-0-0, as I mentioned. Plus, his lone win in 2022 so far. I don't know that there's a necessarily correlation between Harbor Town and Congaree like we'll see this week, but South Carolina golf course, there's some similarities, certainly. And so that's where Spieth has already won this year. I see him going 2 for 2 in the state of South Carolina this week. Benny, thanks for everything as always, buddy.
Yeah, no worries, mate. Yeah, look, I'll just chime in there. So I mentioned Spieth a few times earlier. I think it's a great play, mate. I really do. I think that, especially if he putts anything like he did at that President's Cup, that was old school Spieth, just knocking in 20-footers like they were nothing. If you get that guy, and the guy who beat, by the way, Cam Davis in singles after going behind early by just making a bunch of putts, if you get that guy, he might not only win, but he might win by a bit. So if he's got that form on the board, it's someone to definitely watch.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a nice week for Spieth, using that as a springboard towards success here late in the year and moving into 2023. Thanks to everybody out there for listening to this edition of the Links and Locks Best Bets podcast, presented by Bet365, as it is every single week. Remember, you can find this podcast everywhere you find your favorite podcast. Download, subscribe, rate, and listen every single week. For Ben Everill, I'm Jason Sobel. Good luck with all your bets for this week's CJ Cup. Here's hoping you hit the green.